Step inside the cursed costume and discover the nightmare that begins with one free rental outfit. Natalie thinks she's found a perfect Halloween look, but the suit has its own plans, stitching into skin, silencing mirrors, and pulling her onto a stage where the audience never blinks. Will she escape the endless parade or become the next faceless performer? Watch the full horror adaptation now and feel every bell jingle down your spine. Like chilling tales that slip under your skin? Hit subscribe to join Dark Whispers channel for weekly horror stories, creepy folklore, and unsettling mysteries. And ring the notification bell so you never miss a scream. The rain fell in slow, deliberate drops that night, like the world itself was hesitating. Natalie Green stood under the awning of masquerade and mourning, a narrow costume shop squeezed between a shuttered bar and a pawn shop that hadn't had power in years. The flickering neon sign buzzed above her head, red letters bleeding into blue, forming the name in a haunted blur. Her fingers tightened around the damp flyer she had pulled from a telephone pole 2 blocks back. Grand reopening. One lucky guest will receive a free costume. She hadn't planned to stop. She was just walking home, soaked, miserable, fresh off a call with her landlord threatening eviction. But the flyer had a magnetism, and the shop, with its cracked windows and red velvet curtains drawn just enough to suggest secrets, had whispered to her curiosity. Maybe it was the way the light danced in irregular patterns on the sidewalk, or the music, that faint carousel waltz playing from inside, distant yet persistent, like a call from a forgotten childhood nightmare. When she finally pushed the door open, the chime didn't ring. It clanked, a dry metallic noise like rusted chains brushing against each other. Inside, the air was dense with incense and mothballs. Dim yellow lights dangled from strings overhead, swaying slightly, though there was no draft. Rows upon rows of costumes filled the tight space. Victorian dresses, porcelain masks, soldier uniforms, clown suits with glassy eyes that followed her. The shopkeeper was already watching her. An impossibly thin man, draped in a black turtleneck and plaid pants, leaned behind the counter. His skin was pale, his hair slicked back like wet ink, and his smile, too wide, too still. "Welcome," he said, voice syrupy and slow. "You are our lucky guest tonight." Natalie blinked. What? Every 100th visitor. You are number 100. The shop remembers. He reached beneath the counter and retrieved a long, flat box wrapped in yellowed tissue paper and bound with a red ribbon that looked fresh, wet even, like blood-streaked silk. "This," he whispered, "is yours." Natalie hesitated, her instinct screaming, but the part of her that always wanted to feel chosen, seen, special, silenced it. Her hands moved on their own. The box was heavier than it looked. She peeled the ribbon, unwrapped the paper, and stared. It was a jester costume. Black and white fabric, stitched in jagged diamond patterns, with a high ruffled collar and golden bells sewn at the tips of the cap. But the colors, they shimmered subtly under the light, like oil slicks on water, almost breathing. "It's beautiful," she murmured, half hypnotized. "Try it on," the shopkeeper said. The fitting room was a curtained alcove in the back, dimly lit with a single overhead bulb that buzzed erratically. Natalie slipped out of her wet hoodie and jeans, leaving them in a pile on the bench. The moment she pulled the costume over her skin, a chill ran through her, as if the fabric itself exhaled. The bells jingled once, then fell silent. She adjusted the collar and turned to the mirror. For a second, her reflection lagged, moved slower than she did. Then it smiled before she did. The moment she tried to take it off, she froze. Her fingers couldn't grasp the collar, couldn't find a seam. The fabric clung to her skin like it had melted onto her. Panic crept in like water under a door. She yanked harder, nails scraping her neck, but there was no zipper, no clasp, no give. From the main room, she heard the shopkeeper humming. The same carousel waltz, but off-key now, discordant and sharp. A note bent too far, like a violin string stretched to the point of screaming. She shoved past the curtain. "Excuse me, something's wrong." But the shop was empty. The lights flickered and popped one by one. The scent of incense grew foul, rotten. She ran to the door. It didn't budge, locked. She pounded on it, yelling, then turned to search for another exit. The costumes on the racks had changed. No longer theatrical or playful, they looked decayed, burnt at the edges, blood-stained. And the mannequins, they weren't there before, lined both walls now, each wearing a version of her costume. But their faces were wrong, twisted, some with eyes sewn shut, others grinning with too many teeth. A sound came from behind her, not footsteps, not breathing. Fabric dragging against wood. She spun around and saw the mirror again. But her reflection, it didn't copy her. It tilted its head slowly. The bells on its cap jingled, though she hadn't moved. Its smile stretched further now, teeth lengthening unnaturally. Then it reached forward, from inside the mirror. Natalie screamed and stumbled backward, slamming into the counter. The lights above surged one last time, bathing everything in an ugly yellow glow. For a heartbeat, she saw something behind the glass in every mirror and window. Dozens of faces wearing versions of her costume pressed against the inside as if trying to escape, or trying to pull her in. The humming stopped, and in its absence she heard whispers, low, endless, words she couldn't understand. Some giggled, some sobbed. One voice, clear and calm, echoed louder than the rest. "You are the costume now." Then silence. She woke up hours later on the floor. The shop was open, bright, clean. Daylight filtered through the front windows. The costume still on her, still fused to her skin. The shopkeeper was nowhere to be seen. Her clothes were gone. Her phone, too. A new flyer lay beside her. "Congratulations to our newest performer. Join the masquerade. Forever." She stepped outside, trembling. But no one looked at her, not even the passing police officer, not the woman pushing a stroller. No one even glanced, until she caught her reflection in a car window and saw someone else staring back. The city felt different now. Natalie walked the cracked sidewalks of Hawthorne Street, every step echoing louder than it should. as if the concrete beneath her amplified the sound of her boots. The jester costume clung to her body like a second skin, warm when it should have been cold, tight where it should have been loose. The bells on the cap jangled with every slight movement, but no one noticed. That was the most terrifying part. She passed a group of teenagers outside the gas station, laughing, shoving each other, too absorbed in their own world to see the grotesque figure among them. She passed a mother, tying her child's scarf too tightly. A man yelling into his phone about a lost contract. Not a single head turned. Not even when she cried out. Not even when she screamed, begging someone to help her remove the costume, to look at her, to see her. They didn't. She had become invisible, or worse, irrelevant. Her reflection was the only thing that paid her any attention. In every glass surface, she would catch the jester watching her, head tilted. Expression always a split second too slow, and the eyes, they were starting to look less like hers. They gleamed, even in dim light, as if something behind the glass was awakening. Natalie made it back to her apartment by sunset. The hallway lights flickered as she trudged up the stairs. On the third floor, Mrs. Klein was vacuuming again, her door wide open, the TV inside blaring static instead of her usual cooking shows. Natalie paused. Mrs. Klein never watched static. The old woman stood in her living room, back to the door, her hands twitching in small circles at her sides. She didn't move, didn't react. Then the vacuum turned off on its own. A soft, wet giggle echoed from the kitchen, not from Mrs. Klein. Natalie hurried past, heart pounding. She slammed her own door behind her, deadbolt clicking into place. The silence was thick. Her apartment looked the same, but something was off. The windows were darker than usual. The walls seemed to hum, and from the corner of her eye, she thought she saw shadows stretch and breathe. She rushed to the bathroom and flicked on the light. The mirror glared back, harsh and cold. The jester stared. It didn't smile this time. It just stared, eyes wide, pupils dilated. Natalie leaned closer. Her own face twitched, distorted. No, not her face. The one in the mirror. It twitched again. The mouth curled slightly. Her real mouth didn't move. She gripped the edge of the sink, fingers digging into the porcelain. "I want this off," she whispered. The costume didn't reply, but a sound came from behind her. Soft, rhythmic tapping. She turned slowly. Nothing. Then again. Tap, tap, tap. She looked down. One of the golden bells on the collar was moving on its own, spinning gently. She touched it. It stopped instantly. She backed away from the mirror and turned off the light. She couldn't stand looking at herself anymore, or rather, at that thing looking back. Sleep was impossible. She sat curled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, though the costume's fabric never let her feel cold. Outside, the streetlights buzzed with insect-like chatter. Inside, her apartment creaked more than usual. Pipes moaned, wood groaned, but it was the sound of laughter, distant, muffled, and inhuman, that kept her frozen until the sky turned pale. The next morning, she tried everything again. Scissors snapped at the sleeves, but bounced off like they'd hit rubber. A kitchen knife bent when she tried to cut the collar. She even tried to burn a loose thread over the stove. It didn't blacken, didn't even smoke. The fabric swallowed the fire like it fed on it. Desperate, Natalie searched online. Cursed costume won't come off. Possessed clothing help. Every result was a joke. Urban legends. Creepypastas. She found one forum buried deep in the search results. The worn mask. Threads from people claiming they had worn things that changed them. Hats that whispered. Gloves that moved on their own. A pair of shoes that forced the wearer to walk until their feet bled. And then a post. Recent. Jester suit. Masquerade and mourning. Can't remove it. Seeing things. Becoming someone else. Please help. The username was rsmoke. Natalie clicked the profile. One post. No replies. But the user was marked as active now. Her hands trembled as she typed. I'm wearing it too. I need help. Please respond. The typing indicator flickered off, then stopped. 5 minutes passed. Then a message appeared. rsmoke. It feeds on identity. The more you fight, the more it takes. rsmoke. Don't look in mirrors. rsmoke. Avoid music, especially the waltz. rsmoke. If you hear laughter that isn't yours, run. Natalie's stomach dropped. Natalie, what do I do? Silence, then the profile vanished. Deleted. She stared at the screen, part hammering. In the corner of her vision, the mirror across the room flickered. A shape stood in it now. Her again, but older. Worn. Cracked makeup across her cheeks, like dry paint. The reflection mouthed something. She squinted. It said, "Welcome to the show." The lights in her apartment dimmed, one by one, and in the distance, the carousel music began to play, slower this time, crooked, as if the calliope that played it was rusted through and wheezing its last breath. Ding, dong, ding. 3 notes over and over. Her feet moved before her mind caught up. She ran. Down the hall, past Mrs. Klein's door, still open. Inside, the TV now displayed a stage, red curtains drawn, an empty spotlight flickering. She bolted down the stairs. Outside, the city was darker than it should have been. The sun was up, but clouds hung unnaturally low, and the people, they were all in costume. She froze. A businessman in a fox mask reading a paper upside down. A child with a cracked ballerina doll face walking her dog backward. A woman in a scarecrow outfit with her head tilted at an impossible angle, standing perfectly still at the bus stop. None of them looked at her, but she heard the laughter. Faint, coming from all directions. A chorus of choked giggles, gasps, and wheezing breaths. Natalie stumbled down an alley, clutching her head. "I'm not crazy," she whispered. "I'm not crazy." Behind her, something scraped against the bricks. She turned. A figure in a jester costume, just like hers, stepped out of the shadows. Its face was a smooth porcelain mask, cracked down the center. It raised one hand, index finger to where its lips would be, and tilted its head. Shh! Then it opened its mouth wide, too wide, and let out a sound. Not a scream, a laugh. But it was her laugh, twisted, replayed, echoed through a broken speaker. She ran until her lungs burned. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away. From the costume, from the mirror, from herself. But deep down, a voice whispered through the fabric, hugging her spine. "You're already wearing me. You'll never be anyone else again." The alley was a dead end. Natalie stopped only when her boots splashed into a shallow puddle at the far wall, slick with oily rainbow streaks and broken glass. Her lungs burned. Her fingers trembled. Somewhere behind her, the laughter had stopped. But silence wasn't comfort. It was a threat, a pause before the curtain rose again. She turned slowly, expecting the jester with the cracked porcelain mask to still be there, standing in the shadows like a patient marionette. But the alley was empty. Only a tipped trash bin and graffiti-covered bricks surrounded her now. Still, she didn't feel alone. ... The costume clung tighter, as though it had sensed her fear and decided to savor it. The collar scratched at her throat with each breath. The bells, silent now, felt heavy and warm, like they were filled with something that wasn't metal. Natalie slumped to the ground, back against the cold wall, head tilted to the sky. Above, between buildings, the strip of sky looked bruised, purple clouds curling like smoke. No sun, just shifting shadows. "I need to wake up," she whispered. But she knew she was wide awake, had been since the moment she stepped into masquerade and mourning. She remembered the shopkeeper's face, but only in fragments now. His smile, more painted than real, the way his eyes never blinked, his voice, that syrupy voice. It echoed now, clearer in her mind than it ever was in the shop. "You are the costume now." She pressed her palms to her temples. The words didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. And yet it did. On a level she didn't want to acknowledge, she felt it happening. Not just wearing the costume, becoming it. Her skin no longer itched beneath the fabric. Her muscles didn't ache from its weight. It had merged with her, fused into her. She could no longer tell where the cloth ended and she began. Her phone was gone. Her apartment no longer safe. The people around her, they didn't see her. Not the way she wanted to be seen. The mirror saw her, and that was the problem. She had to find that store again, tear it down, burn it if she had to, make the shopkeeper take it back, reverse whatever curse he had placed on her. But first, she had to survive the night. A sound snapped her out of her thoughts. Drip, drip, drip. It came from above. She looked up. A figure was perched on the fire escape, hunched low like a gargoyle. It wore a costume like hers, only stained, darker, torn in places. Its head twitched when it saw her notice it. Then, slowly, it climbed down, one jerky limb at a time. Natalie scrambled to her feet. The figure dropped into the alley with a thud. Its bell jingled once, high and sharp. Then silence. The thing stood, swaying slightly. Its face wasn't masked. It had no face, just flesh smoothed over where eyes and mouth should be, as if a painter had given up halfway through. But it was breathing. Loud, wheezy breaths, gurgling at the end like fluid sloshing in its lungs. Natalie backed away. "Stay away from me!" The figure tilted its head. A string of fabric unfurled from its mouthless face, red like a ribbon. It fluttered toward her across the ground. Reaching, seeking, she bolted out of the alley. Across the street, horns blared, tires screeched, but again no one saw her, or if they did, they looked through her, around her, as if she were a ghost. Her legs ached. The costume didn't tear, didn't snag. It glided across every surface. She ran until she found an old church, St. Laura's. It had closed years ago after a fire scorched the rectory, but the front doors were still intact. She pushed her way in, into the scent of old wood and ashes, and slammed the door shut behind her. Gust exploded in the air like breath from a corpse. Candles still sat on rusted holders, unlit. A broken crucifix leaned against the far wall, one arm missing. Pews stood crooked, gnawed at their edges by termites or time. Natalie collapsed at the altar, breathing hard. And then the bells on her collar jingled. Once, twice. She wasn't alone. A rustle came from the confessional booth. She stepped back. The door creaked open slowly. A woman emerged, young, maybe 25, pale, her eyes wide and wild. Her costume was different. A nurse's uniform, outdated by decades, blood-stained. The red was too bright to be fake. Her hands trembled. "You're new," the woman said. Her voice cracked like dried leaves. Natalie nodded, barely breathing. "You see me?" The nurse laughed. It wasn't cruel, just broken. "Of course I see you. You're one of us now." "I'm not like you," Natalie whispered. "You are," the woman said. "It fits too well, doesn't it?" Natalie wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. The nurse limped closer, her shoes soaked in something dark. "They give you a role. You wear it. You become it. Some take longer to fade, but we all fade." "How do I stop it?" "You don't," the nurse said. "You dance the part until the curtain drops, or until something else takes your place." Natalie felt her throat tighten. "Who are you?" The woman looked down at herself, then back up. "I was Diane. Now I'm the bleeding nurse." "That's what the crowd calls me." Natalie shook her head. "What crowd?" Diane's smile widened. "You'll hear them. When the music starts, they always clap when the blood sprays." Something in the distance clanged. A bell. Not from her collar. Deeper, like a stage curtain drawing back. Then the music began again. The carousel waltz, slower than before. Out of tune, played on a broken music box winding down. Diane turned to the altar, dropped to her knees, and began laughing. Head thrown back, Natalie ran, out of the church, into the night. The city had changed again. Lights flickered red and gold. Confetti drifted down like ash. Figures in costumes lined the sidewalks, unmoving, as if waiting for a parade that had not yet started. The wind carried a whisper. Act 1 is over. A spotlight flickered on above her. Then another. The bells on her cap began to jingle without movement. And in the glass windows lining the street, her reflection no longer followed her. It led. Smiling, always smiling, with velvet skin and a plastic smile. Natalie's legs were beginning to betray her. She had run until the buildings looked unfamiliar again. the streetlights blinking like tired eyes, casting her shadow long and warped across the cracked sidewalks. Her breaths came shallow, rapid, muffled by the thick collar of the jester costume that now felt heavier than bone. Every stitch itched beneath her skin. No, not itched, pulsed, like veins. She collapsed behind an old bus shelter near the edge of the industrial district. Beneath a billboard that once advertised toothpaste but was now peeling into wet curls, revealing older, darker messages underneath. Her hands trembled as she examined her arms. The fabric had begun to fray in places, but instead of tearing, it revealed flesh beneath, not hers. The skin underneath was too smooth, too pale, seamless, and stitched. Thin black threads laced her wrists, coiling like vines, ending in tight knots that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. She tried to dig her fingers under one of the threads, pull it loose, but it moved, twitching, then tightened. She gasped and clutched her arm, watching a bead of red bloom through the stitch and slowly trickle down her hand. It was blood, her blood. She heard a creak above her, a rusted groan. Then a voice, soft and childlike. "Don't pick at them, they don't like that." Natalie froze. A figure crouched on the edge of the bus shelter, knees pulled up to its chest, head cocked at a curious angle. It wore a pig mask, not the plastic party kind, realistic, wet. The eyes were glass, but too round, too human. Its hands were small, but wrong, with too many joints. Fingernails painted red. Not polish, paint. Maybe. Natalie couldn't move. The figure climbed down, dropping to the ground with a muffled thud. It made no sound when it landed. No breath, no grunt. It simply stood and stared. Then walked toward her with slow, deliberate steps. Natalie scrambled up, backing against the cracked glass of the shelter. "Who are you?" she whispered. The pig-headed thing stopped. "I'm just like you," it said. "One of the cast." It tilted its head, and the glass eyes caught the streetlight just right, flashing yellow like a predator in the dark. "Do you remember your audition?" Natalie shook her head. "I never auditioned. This was a mistake. I never wanted this." The thing laughed. It sounded like a tape skipping in a broken player. "Everyone says that. At first. Then the stitching begins. Once the blood comes, the mask follows." It reached up and tapped its snout. "They sew it on last." Natalie's chest rose and fell in panic. She turned to run, but the thing caught her wrist, grip surprisingly gentle. "Don't run. It'll find you faster." "What will?" she cried. The pig-faced figure leaned close. Its breath was cold and smelled of formaldehyde. "The seamstress." Natalie tore herself free and ran. She didn't care what direction, only away. She passed flickering lamplights and storefronts that didn't belong. A bakery selling teeth. A toy store where all the dolls stared out with burned eyes. A dry cleaner advertising, "We press souls too." Behind her, the music started again, not the carousel waltz. Something slower. A lullaby, twisted. Sung by a voice that sounded stitched together from several throats. "Hush now, child. Don't make a peep. The needle's coming while you sleep." Natalie turned a corner and found herself back where she began. The costume shop. masquerade and mourning. Only now the sign was no longer flickering. It blazed red, letters sharper than before, and the front window had changed. No longer velvet curtains, now a display, mannequins in motion, each one wearing a different cursed costume. A fireman with skin melting through his uniform, a ballerina whose limbs were jointed backwards, a clown with knives instead of fingers, all jerking as if controlled by invisible strings, and in the center, a jester. It turned toward her slowly, like it sensed her watching. It wore her face. Its smile widened. Natalie screamed and ran to the door. It opened without resistance. Inside, the lights were dim. The smell of old incense stronger. The music louder. And she heard something new. Snip, snip, snip. She followed the sound, against every instinct screaming inside her. At the back of the shop was a door she hadn't seen before. Behind the counter, ornate, wooden, carved with scenes of masquerade dancers stitched together like patchwork. She opened it. Inside was a workshop. Bolts of fabric lined the walls, most too dark to have any color. Needles hovered mid-air, suspended by nothing. Threads writhed like worms in jars. And at the center, seated at an ancient sewing machine made of bone and brass, was a woman. The seamstress. Her face was hidden behind a veil stitched shut across the eyes. Her fingers were long and skeletal, moving with mechanical precision as she sewed something onto a blank mannequin. Natalie recognized the shape forming. Another jester. Another her. The seamstress stopped. Her head turned slightly. "You're early," she said. Natalie stepped back. "What are you doing to me?" The seamstress smiled, though her lips never moved. "Finishing the part. You were chosen, tailored. You fit better than most." "I want it off!" "You are it now," the seamstress said. "You've already begun to bleed." Natalie looked down, her arms, her legs, even her torso, all stitched. Red lines traced every seam of the costume, and beneath each thread she felt the slow, steady pulse of something else. Not her heart, not her blood, something older. She backed away toward the door. "I'll find someone who can undo this," she said. ... The seamstress chuckled. "There's no one left, only rolls and curtains waiting to fall." Natalie ran. She didn't remember bursting through the shop again, or the glass shattering as she escaped. Only the sound of bells and the song still playing. Behind her a voice whispered, "The thread is in your blood now. The stage is nearly set. All that's left is the mask." Natalie didn't remember falling, but she woke in the alley again, arms crumpled beneath her, cheek pressed against damp asphalt that reeked of oil and rot. Her head pounded. Her breath came in gasps, shallow and uneven, and her ears rang with the ghost of that lullaby, its melody crawling under her skin like a whisper she couldn't shake. The sky above had changed. Not night, not dawn, just a bruised gray with no clear source of light. Like someone had draped a rotting veil over the city. The buildings around her leaned in, misshapen, windows wide like watching eyes. Her hands moved before her mind caught up. She gripped the collar of the jester suit and pulled hard. It didn't budge. Her fingers dug into the stitching at her wrists, yanking, clawing, until one of the black threads snapped with a twang like a violin string. She screamed. Blood poured from the seam. Not like a cut, but like something internal had ruptured. A pressure, a depth. The moment the thread broke, pain surged through her like fire racing along nerves that weren't hers anymore. Her vision blurred. Her teeth clenched. She collapsed against the alley wall, gasping. Then she heard it. A click, and another. The sound of heels on concrete, sharp and measured. Echoing. Someone was coming. She forced herself to stand, one hand pressed to the bleeding seam, the other steadying her against the bricks. The woman appeared from the far end of the alley. Not the seamstress, someone else. She wore a black suit, sleek and immaculate, her hair pulled back so tight it looked painted on. No costume, no bells. Just black gloves, black boots, and black eyes. She moved with precision, like she was walking on a stage with a script burned into her bones. "Natalie Green," the woman said. Natalie blinked. "How do you know my name?" The woman tilted her head. "You've been stitched. You entered the shop. That makes you one of the marked. I didn't choose this. No one ever does." Natalie backed away. "Who are you?" The woman stopped 6 feet from her, hands behind her back. Her mouth twitched into a half smile. "I'm the Unsewn, one of the few who escaped before the final thread was tied. They don't like us. We're the ones who remember." Natalie's heart thudded. "You got it off?" The woman's smile faded. "I removed it." She raised her right hand and pulled off the glove. The skin beneath was mangled, burned, charred black with ridges of exposed muscle and raw nerve endings that pulsed with each heartbeat. "I cut it, tore it, burned it away." Natalie felt sick. "But you're alive." "Half," the woman replied. "They call me Mira, and I can help you, but you need to stop fighting the suit." Natalie's jaw tightened. "What?" "It's like a parasite. The more you pull, the deeper it goes. Pain is its anchor. Panic is its blood. If you want to stop it, you have to trick it." "How?" Mira glanced over her shoulder. The alley behind her flickered, like a film reel catching on fire for a second. "They'll be looking for you soon. The seamstress isn't the only one who threads the marked. There are others. The collector, the puppet master, the bellman." "The what?" "You'll know them when you hear them." A distant bell rang in the alley. Once, then twice. A low, mournful chime that vibrated through Natalie's chest like the call of something ancient. Mira's eyes sharpened. "Too late." She grabbed Natalie's hand and pulled her through a rusted door in the side of the building. Inside was darkness, thick, breathing darkness that seemed to pull the sound from the air. "Where are we?" Natalie whispered. "Behind the set," Mira replied. "Not many know how to get here. Even fewer know how to leave." As Natalie's eyes adjusted, she saw walls lined with props, crates marked with symbols. Shelves of masks, some cracked, others weeping resin tears. A broken marionette dangled from the ceiling, its string wrapped around its neck like a noose. They moved down a narrow hall. Lights flickered overhead, casting brief flashes of color. Red, then blue, then a sickly yellow. Each time the light changed, the shadows on the wall danced. Natalie whispered, "How do we stop this?" Mira didn't look back. "You don't stop the play, you change your role." They reached a door at the end of the hall. Mira placed her hand on it. "This is your only chance. Once we cross, you'll be in the rehearsal." The what? But the door had already opened. Natalie stepped through and found herself standing in the center of a grand theater. Velvet seats stretched in all directions, empty and silent. The ceiling above was painted with stars. The stage before her glowed under a single spotlight. There was no audience, only mannequins, dressed in tattered suits and gowns, their faces frozen mid-clap, their glass eyes glistening in the dim light. One leaned too far forward, lips parted in a silent cheer. Another slumped, its head cracked down the center. Mira stepped onto the stage. "You have to perform." Natalie stared. "What are you talking about? Act out your pain, speak it, twist it, make it something else. The suit only survives if it consumes you. Give it someone else to feed on." Natalie shook her head. "This is insane." Mira raised her burned hand and pointed to the curtain behind the stage. It twitched, then parted, and from the darkness, Natalie's reflection stepped out, still wearing the jester costume, but different now. Its face wore a mask, porcelain, cracked, smiling wide and unnatural. It moved with elegance, arms raised like a dancer, bells jingling with every step. It was her, and it bowed, then charged. Natalie screamed and ducked as the reflection lunged, its hands clawed, its movements too smooth, like it was gliding. Mira shouted something she couldn't hear. The world tilted, the stage warped. The mannequin audience erupted in applause, thunderous, deafening, the sound of hundreds of broken hands slapping in unison. Natalie fell to her knees. The reflection reached her, grabbed her face, and stopped, because Natalie had done something unexpected. She smiled, not a smile of joy, not of surrender, a performer's smile. The bells jingled and then stopped. The reflection blinked, confused. Natalie whispered, "This isn't your stage anymore." And with both hands, she tore the mask off the reflection's face. There was no face beneath, only threads, coiling, writhing, searching. And when they touched her skin, they recoiled, because something inside her had shifted. She wasn't just Natalie anymore. She was the jester, but she wasn't its prisoner. She was the lead. The theater cracked, splintered, and the mannequin screamed. Natalie opened her eyes to find herself lying on the floor of her apartment. Morning light bled through the window, faint, pale. She sat up. The costume was still there, but the threads weren't pulsing anymore. The bells were silent, and stitched across her wrist, in perfect black lettering, "Do not remove." The bathroom mirror stared back at her, but it didn't reflect her. Natalie stood in silence, the sink's edge cold beneath her fingertips, her breath fogging the glass. Yet the figure in the mirror did not move. It did not mimic. It watched, a still image of what she used to be, before the stitches, before the blood, before the bells. Her own face was somewhere behind the mask now, buried beneath fabric that no longer itched, seams that no longer bled. The jester suit felt like skin, worse than skin. It responded. Each breath she took caused the collar to lift slightly. Each beat of her heart made the golden bells sway. And stitched along her wrist, like a cursed signature, "Do not remove." She touched the letters again. The black thread was smooth, firm, a warning, a command, a reminder that she had changed something on that stage in the rehearsal. She didn't know how or why, but the stitched version of her had recoiled, and the suit had listened. Yet the reflection in the mirror hadn't. Natalie slowly raised her hand. Her reflection stayed still. Then it blinked. She stumbled backward, heart thudding in her throat. The mirror remained frozen for another few seconds. Then the jester within tilted its head. Slowly, deliberately. Its bells didn't move. Point. A sound crackled in the walls, not from the mirror, from the pipes behind it, like something slithering, something wet. She turned off the bathroom light and stepped back into the apartment. It had changed again. Slightly. Barely. But it had. The couch was closer to the window. Her bookshelf was missing one title, The Anatomy of Masks. A pile of her laundry had folded itself. The TV displayed static, even though she hadn't turned it on in days. She walked across the living room in slow, careful steps. Every sound she made echoed too long. She tried the front door. Locked. Chained. Deadbolted. She hadn't done that. She hadn't done any of this. Natalie returned to the kitchen and opened the fridge. Everything inside was sealed in wax paper and labeled with faded handwritten tags. Flesh of the performer. Echo milk. Tongues salted. Her knees buckled. She closed the door and pressed her forehead to it, trying to keep the nausea from rising. She wasn't in her apartment. Not anymore. The mask had pulled her somewhere in between, somewhere just outside the normal world. Not the rehearsal, not the shop. Something worse. A knock echoed from the bathroom, just once. Then silence. She turned. Her reflection stood in the doorway now, not within the mirror. Not mimicking, just watching. Still in the jester suit, though the fabric had rotted in places. Her face was hollowed. Her eyes were sewn shut with black thread. Her mouth smiled impossibly wide, jaw distended like a marionette's. Natalie backed away. The other version of her didn't move. It didn't need to. It had already begun to replace her. Something hissed from inside the walls. A scraping, then a low moan. Like metal twisting underwater. She ran to the bedroom, locked the door behind her, and pressed her back to it. A voice whispered from beneath the bed. "Do you still think you're the one inside?" Natalie dropped to her knees and looked under. It was pitch black, but something moved. A hand, thin, splintered, wearing a wedding ring she didn't recognize. Then another voice came from the closet. "Or are you just the costume, dreaming it's a girl?" She crawled backward, shaking. "I'm real," she whispered. "I'm still real." The bells on her costume jingled in response. Soft, mocking. She curled onto the floor, clutching herself. Trying to silence the noise in her head, But the voices didn't stop. They whispered from the walls, from the floorboards, from inside the pipes. Natalie is just the name stitched over the hole. The crowd waits. The mask is hungry. You wore it. It wears you. She screamed, and all at once, silence. Not quiet. Silence. The kind that presses against your eardrums, that makes your own heartbeat sound like thunder, that lets you hear the wet blink of your own eyes. Then, something new. Laughter. Children. Far away. Echoing through the pipes. Through the drains. Natalie stood, numb, and stumbled into the hallway. She followed the sound, even though every part of her body screamed not to. At the end of the hall, the mirror waited. Not hers. A tall, freestanding mirror that hadn't been there before. Its frame was made of intertwined arms, porcelain, bleeding, gripping each other in agony. The glass shimmered like water under moonlight, and her reflection inside it moved. It beckoned. Natalie stepped forward. The moment she touched the glass, it rippled, and the bells on her collar began to sing. Not jingle, not chime, sing. A low, lilting melody, mournful and old, like a hymn forgotten by the living. She pressed both hands to the mirror, and it sucked her in. She fell into the dark. No air, no ground, only velvet black, and the faint sound of applause growing louder. When she landed, it was not on the stage, but in a room made of mirrors, each one reflecting her, but none of them showed the same face. Some were laughing, others crying. One bled from the eyes, another pulled its own mask off, revealing a blank void beneath. And one smiled gently. That one stepped forward and spoke. "You're not the audience anymore." Natalie opened her mouth to respond, but her voice didn't come out. Only the sound of bells. The mirrors would not stop whispering. Natalie stood barefoot in the endless chamber of reflections, surrounded by dozens of herself. Some broken, some whole, others staring at her with hungry stillness. They pressed palms against the glass from the inside, mimicking movements she hadn't made. When she turned her head, they turned slightly after. When she blinked, they held their eyes open just a second too long. The glass wasn't cold. It pulsed faintly with warmth, like the skin of something alive. Each version of her wore the jester suit, but none wore it exactly the same. Some were shredded and soaked in blood. Others pristine and regal, embroidered in gold. One suit was made entirely of black thread, woven so tightly it shimmered like scales. They whispered in unison, like a choir of echoes stitched into space. "She's almost finished. She sings without knowing. She'll forget soon, like the rest." Natalie covered her ears, but the fabric of the suit shifted over her hands and muffled the motion. It had begun crawling higher, fusing to her neck, lacing up the underside of her jaw. The bells no longer jingled. They listened. Something behind the mirrors scraped. A low, slow drag, metal against stone. Her skin prickled with every pass. She didn't want to know what moved behind them, but part of her already did. She had heard of it once before. The collector. a figure Mira had mentioned with a flash of warning in her eyes. The one who gathered the lost, the unfinished, those whose roles hadn't been refined. Natalie turned toward the tallest mirror. Her reflection there stood differently, proud, regal. A crimson tear painted under one eye. It stepped forward and whispered, "Run, little fool. He comes to fold you." Then the glass cracked, a thin fracture, a single spiderweb line, spreading. The chamber shuddered. Somewhere, deep within the reflections, the applause began again. She ran. The mirrors screamed as she passed. Voices layered on top of one another, old and young, male and female, some gurgling through water, others whispering in dead tongues. They called her name in mocking tones, then in pleading ones. "Natalie, Natalie, let us in." The floor beneath her changed as she ran. First smooth glass, then velvet, then something soft that squelched under her weight. She didn't stop, couldn't. Her pulse hammered behind her eyes. She turned a sharp corner that hadn't been there a second before and found a narrow passage lit by swinging lanterns shaped like crying masks. The hallway was lined with fabric, all kinds, all colors. Rolls of it hung on racks that wept dye, the floor wet with ink and pigment. The smell was overwhelming. Spice, rust, perfume, and something foul that reminded her of rotting silk. Threads dangled from the ceiling like cobwebs. Some twitched when she passed beneath. At the far end of the hall, a door pulsed with red light. Natalie didn't pause. She flung it open. Inside was a circular room lined with sewing mannequins. But these weren't made of wood or plastic. They were flesh, and they breathed. Their torsos heaved gently. Some were missing limbs. Others had mouths where their stomachs should have been, whispering nonsense. One had a single massive eye stitched into its chest, which blinked when she stepped closer. A needle hovered in the center of the room, as long as a spear and tethered to the ceiling by an infinite thread that spiraled upward and vanished. The thread vibrated with tension, like it was holding something back. Natalie stepped toward it. Something inside her tugged. The suit wanted her to kneel, to present herself to the needle, to complete the process. But she resisted. "You're not me," she muttered. "You're just sewn on top of me." The needle vibrated harder. Then a voice echoed through the chamber. Male, deep, dry as paper left in fire. "You are what you wear, nothing more." A figure emerged from the opposite side of the room, 7 feet tall, wrapped in layers of cloth that moved like skin. His face was featureless, but seams ran along where his eyes and mouth should have been. Constantly unpicking and restitching themselves, he carried a book under one arm. Its cover was made of patchwork leather, stitched with names. She saw her own, The Collector. Natalie stepped back. "You can't take me," she said. "I do not take," he replied. "I archive. You're incomplete, torn from your script." He opened the book. A gust of wind erupted from its pages, howling voices and paper blades. Natalie shielded her face, falling to her knees. The fabric on her suit tightened, compressing around her chest, making it harder to breathe. "You don't belong to yourself anymore," the Collector said. Natalie clawed at the ground. "I do." The lights in the chamber flickered. And then another voice answered. Not hers. One of the mannequins spoke. No. Another joined. She changed her part. Then another. She danced when the reflection broke. The mannequins moved. They began to twitch, to rise from their frozen states, to point at the collector. "She is not yours." The collector paused. He looked to the thread above, as if consulting something unseen. Then, softly, "Very well." He closed the book. The chamber collapsed. The mannequins screamed. Natalie felt the floor vanish beneath her, replaced with a free-fall sensation, like falling through curtains made of memory. Her childhood bedroom, her college dorm, the shop, the stage, her apartment, all flashing in and out of view like strobe-lit photographs. Then, silence. She woke up sitting in a chair, a velvet seat, wooden arms. In front of her, a vanity mirror surrounded by light bulbs, each one flickering erratically. The dressing room. Her reflection stared back. It wore a mask now, not porcelain, her own face carved in wax, painted cheeks, frozen smile. And behind the mask, the fabric moved. She tried to speak, but her mouth wouldn't open. Only the bells answered, slowly, softly, a whisper from the threads in her neck. Curtain in 5. The lights around the vanity pulsed like a heartbeat. Natalie stared into the waxy imitation of her own face. The mask rested atop her real features like a death shroud, its eyes painted with a shimmer that mimicked life. The smile was too wide, too clean, too practiced. Her fingers twitched on the vanity's edge, nails digging into soft wood that felt almost fleshy beneath the lacquered finish. She couldn't scream. The jester suit had crept up her throat again. Threads laced like veins across her jaw, pulling tighter each time she tried to resist. The stitched words on her wrist, "Do not remove," now glowed faintly under the vanity bulbs, as if the warning had become alive, aware that curtain time approached. She stood slowly. The bells on her costume chimed once. Not a jingle, but a choked gasp of sound, like a child's toy left out in the rain. The dressing room door opened on its own. Beyond it, a hallway stretched into shadow. No windows, no exit signs, only walls made of old wallpaper curling at the corners, stained with decades of sweat and silence. The floor creaked as she stepped forward, echoing with the soft thump of unseen footsteps that moved just out of sync with hers. At the end of the hall stood a door marked with a brass plaque, "Wardrobe." She pushed it open. Inside, the room was cold and enormous. Racks upon racks of costumes towered above her, stacked so high they vanished into the rafters. Each hanger held something terrible. Some were stitched from fur and teeth. Others shimmered like they were soaked in wet ink. One costume, hung alone near the far wall, pulsed softly. It looked like stretched skin, tanned and stitched in the shape of a ballerina's tutu. Voices whispered from the racks. "They wore me until the blood dried. My laugh was real once. Don't pick the face. It might still bite. Natalie turned sharply at a hiss behind her. It wasn't a voice. It was a face. A pale mask floated in the air, disconnected from any body, hovering at head height. Its mouth was sewn shut, eyes black. It drifted toward her like a jellyfish in water. When it reached her, it stopped and tilted. Then more came, dozens of faces, some laughing, some crying, others screaming silently. They floated between the racks, brushing against her shoulders. The one closest leaned in, its mouth finally unstitching with a wet pop. "Choose," it said. Natalie backed away. "No." "Choose," it insisted, louder. The faces began to chant. "Choose, choose, choose, choose." She ran deeper into the wardrobe, past cloaks that whispered her name and gloves that reached out from the shelves, fingers twitching like insects. The chanting grew louder. The floating faces followed, faster now, their stitched mouths snapping open and shut, each one demanding her decision. She stumbled into a clearing between the racks. A pedestal stood there, and on it rested a single mask. It was blank. No features, smooth as porcelain. It pulsed with heat. A voice, calm, close, spoke behind her ear. "You'll need a face, or they'll give you one." Natalie turned. Mira stood there. Her suit was gone, replaced by a robe stitched from shadows. Her burned hand now gloved in silk. Her eyes were covered by a black ribbon, and across her chest was a line of thread, pulling slowly with each breath, like something was trying to unzip her from the inside. Mira reached toward the pedestal. "This is the only mask that hasn't spoken yet," she said. "That's why they fear it." "What happens if I wear it?" Natalie asked. "You stop being their story," Mira replied. "You become your own." Natalie hesitated. The chanting stopped. The room fell utterly silent, except for the faint rustle of fabric and the distant creak of a puppet's joint. Then a bell rang, one sharp, deafening chime. "Curtain time!" The mirror behind the pedestal lit up. It showed the stage. Velvet curtains drawn. A spotlight waiting. The crowd, mannequins, shadows, and floating faces murmured in anticipation. The stage was set, and she was expected. Natalie could feel the pull, the threads tightening along her spine. "Put it on," Mira whispered. Natalie lifted the blank mask. It was warm, breathing. She pressed it to her face. The jester suit shifted. The bells fell silent. She walked toward the mirror. It opened. A rush of air pulled her through, and she stepped onto the stage. The curtains parted. The lights burned. The audience leaned forward, and she stood there, not smiling, not mimicking, just standing, a figure in a jester's body, with no face but her own behind a blank slate, holding silence like a blade. Then she spoke. Her voice echoed unnaturally, not distorted, amplified. "I am not your puppet." The mannequins twitched. Some shattered. Others burst into applause. The floating faces screamed. Behind her, the threads of the suit began to loosen. The bells rang once more. Not in fear, ... but in recognition. The mask was no longer blank. it had taken on her true face. Not the one she remembered, but the one she had chosen. Borrowed no more. The applause didn't fade. It shifted. What began as the hollow clap of mannequin palms and unseen watchers transformed into something wetter, meatier, like raw hands slapping against bone. The sound filled the air, a pulsing rhythm that echoed through the rafters of the stage. It wasn't celebration. It was summoning. Natalie stood frozen under the spotlight, mask warm against her skin, suit no longer strangling her, but clinging like an obedient second skin. For the first time, she wasn't sure who had control, her or it, but she was standing, not collapsing, not stitched down. Her face in the mask stared out across the theater of the damned. And then the stage began to move. It tilted, groaned, and split down the center. Like jaws. A pathway unfurled before her, descending into a corridor lined with flesh-covered walls and crimson curtains twitching like lungs. The audience leaned forward in unison. From behind, Mira's voice echoed once more, quiet and sharp. "They want their final act!" Natalie turned to see her standing at the curtain's edge. The ribbon still covered her eyes. But something inside the darkness shimmered. She was holding a lantern now, its flame pale blue, casting long shadows behind her that moved with minds of their own. "You said I could be free," Natalie said. "You can," Mira replied, "but not without finishing the parade." "I don't understand." Mira raised the lantern, illuminating the carved writing etched along the walls of the passage ahead. It wasn't words, it was names. Hundreds of them, thousands. Each name twisted into threads sewn into the very flesh of the corridor. Natalie reached out and felt a jolt shoot up her arm as her fingers grazed one. Eleanor Vale, role, crying widow, discarded after second show. The text bled into her mind. She recoiled. "These are everyone who wore the mask and lost themselves," Mira said. "Everyone who marched in the parade until they were nothing but fabric and echo. Why keep them here?" "Because someone has to perform." Natalie looked down the path again. The bells on her costume jingled softly, not warning her this time, but coaxing. They wanted her to move, to walk, to take her place. "I'm not one of them," she whispered. Mira nodded. "Then prove it." Natalie stepped forward. The floor shifted with each step, sometimes stone, sometimes stage. Once, she stepped onto teeth. They clicked beneath her, and laughter spilled from the walls. Not her laughter, not human. Ah ha ha ha. Tap, tap, tap. Shadows moved ahead of her. Figures emerged. Not costumes, not people. Things caught between. They limped, crawled, danced in slow, broken spirals. Their costumes clung too tightly, skin fused with fabric. Some had no faces, others had too many. Their eyes glowed like theater lights left on too long. One figure, dressed like a ringmaster with a skeletal jaw sewn permanently into a grin, stepped forward and held out a cane. "The parade does not pause," he rasped. "It needs its leader." "I'm not your leader." Natalie said, "You wear the bells. They don't own me. The ringmaster's jaw twitched. They will. He slammed the cane into the floor. And the hallway tilted violently. Natalie fell to one knee as the walls bent and flexed. From the ceiling above, wires dropped like puppet strings, glinting in the lantern light. They reached for her. She ran. The bells screamed as she pushed forward, faster, deeper, past broken dancers and melting clowns, past suits that turned their heads as she passed. The corridor narrowed, twisted, became a spiral stair made of rib cages and red carpet. At the top, she found the door, black wood, brass handle, one word carved into it. Exit. She hesitated. Her mask vibrated softly, and the suit tightened once around her ribs, then relaxed. Behind her, the sound returned. A drumbeat, low, loud, the start of the march. Figures began pouring from the passage, walking, twisting, dancing. The parade had begun again. The crowd didn't scream. They sang, voices cracked and broken, all carrying the same verse in harmony. The bells are gold, the threads are red. You march until you lose your head. The face you wore is worn no more. The mask is you, and you are dead. Natalie gripped the door handle and turned. It didn't open. The mask pulsed against her face. She turned back. The parade was moving toward her, slow but endless. Mira stood behind the last dancer, flame held high. "You can't leave through the exit," Mira called. "Not if you're still wearing someone else's face." Natalie reached up. The mask didn't fight. Her fingers slid beneath it and pulled. It came off, and with it, a scream. Not hers. The mask shrieked as it left her skin, unraveling threads of memory and sound. Her body shook. Blood trickled from her nose. The suit fluttered as if in mourning. But she was free. Her real face stared into the crowd now, and they saw her. The parade paused. One dancer stepped forward. Her own face, the version she had seen in the mirror, the reflection made flesh. Its eyes were hollow, but its mouth trembled. "I wore you," it said. "Not anymore," Natalie whispered. She pressed the blank mask into its hands and stepped aside. The figure accepted it, placed it over its face, and became nothing. The suit collapsed. The body crumpled. The mask shattered. Natalie turned the handle again. The door opened. Cool air hit her face like a forgotten memory. She stepped through, and the sound of the parade faded. But even as the door closed behind her, she heard a final whisper from the depths. The parade never ends. It only waits for a new tune. The door shut behind her with a soft click, but the sound echoed like a coffin lid sealing. Natalie stood in darkness. No wind, no footsteps, no fabric rustling or bells laughing in her ear. Just the slow, pulsing silence of a world holding its breath. The kind of silence that sits behind walls, under floorboards, in the breath between screams. She blinked. Light bloomed overhead, not blinding, but gentle. The soft yellow glow of a street lamp. It cast long pauses, meandering shadows across cobblestones slick with last night's rain. The air smelled of old brick, faint perfume, and something burnt beneath the surface. She was back, the real world. The city, or some version of it. The storefront stood where she remembered. Her apartment's silhouette was visible down the block. A neon sign buzzed 3 stories up, letters half flickering in a wordless hum. The world felt smaller than before, dimmer. Natalie stepped forward. The jester suit had unraveled. No longer clinging, no longer whispering. She wore only the black underclothes beneath it. Her skin bore faint impressions where the fabric had fused. Ghosts of stitches across her wrists, faded ink of "do not remove" still visible like a scar. Her reflection waited in the window of a darkened cafe. This time, it matched her movements. No delay, no smiling mask, just her, tired, pale, whole. She stared at herself for a long time, searching for signs, some last thread left behind. But there was nothing. No bells, no twitch, no echo. She was free. Or so she wanted to believe. Behind her, a wind stirred, cold and sudden. She turned, expecting something, someone, but the street was empty, except for a flyer drifting through the air. It spun lazily, caught in the breeze, until it slapped wetly against her chest. Natalie peeled it off. The same faded lettering stared back at her. Masquerade and warning. One lucky guest will receive a free costume. She let it fall. Footsteps approached. She tensed, but it was a child, no older than 8, walking alone, holding her mother's hand through an invisible thread only children could still see. She passed Natalie without a glance, then stopped, turned, and smiled. A strange, wide-eyed smile. Natalie's heart sank. She knelt. "Hey, are you okay?" The girl nodded, then said softly, "You are not wearing your face anymore." Natalie froze. "What did you say?" The girl pointed to her own face. "It's crooked, like when the strings get cut." Natalie stepped back. The girl turned and walked away. No mother, no one. Just a hollow echo of tiny footsteps fading into silence. Natalie stood motionless for minutes, maybe hours. The street never changed. No cars, no voices. Just shadows stretching in the wrong direction. Then the chime came, a soft, metallic clank, like a bell against rusted glass. She knew the sound. She turned to the alley beside the laundromat. It hadn't been there before, but it was now. And at the end of it, a door. Red-painted wood, gold trim, a single flickering bulb above it. Buzzing softly like an old stage light, masquerade and mourning. She approached, breath held. Her hand rose, then stopped. Because it wasn't just the shop again. It was her. Painted onto the window, her face, wearing the jester suit, no longer melting or cracked or fading, smiling, holding a gift-wrapped box. The box she remembered, wrapped in old tissue and blood-colored ribbon. A sign hung beneath it, now hiring. Natalie turned away, walked back onto the street. She passed a man reading a newspaper upside down, lips whispering lines he'd forgotten. A woman in a red coat, crying without tears. A street performer juggling knives that didn't cast shadows. The world was wearing masks, not stitched or sewn, just quiet, unspoken, invisible. Natalie looked down at her reflection in a puddle. It didn't look back. It stood there wearing the suit again, raising a finger to its lips. Shh! Natalie closed her eyes. She kept walking, one foot, then the next, becoming lighter, becoming someone else. Because maybe she had never been the lucky guest. Maybe she had always been the part waiting to be played. And somewhere, just beyond the curtain, the crowd still waited. The play was over, but the costume remained.